Welcome back to Counterculture. It really is a welcome back because we haven't filmed in forever.
Like 2 weeks at least.
I think it's 3.
3?
It's all my fault.
Okay.
Not your fault, just my fault. We got lots to say.
Yes.
I think the last thing that we left off on was the eclipse thing that's happening. Right?
Yes.
I wanna touch on that, but I just have a very simple question for you, right? It was funny because I was at a guys group the other night, and the whole idea of the eclipse came up, and a super well-meaning, totally innocent guy said, "Hey, listen, I've heard that the eclipse is gonna run through 7 cities named Nineveh." Right? And that the one 7 years ago went through 7 cities called Salem. And that's floating out there on the internet, right? All over the place. Well, another gentleman jumped in on this thing and said, that's not true. It's a lie, because only 2 of those cities named Nineveh is it actually going through. The other 5, it's only going to be a partial eclipse. Right? It's not going to be the total thing, not going to be full. So that whole idea that has any kind of meaning is off. And I was immediately struck by the intensity of the dismissal, right? And it made me think about Mary. So you're going to have to follow me, right? I'm in a guys meeting and I'm thinking about Mary. And the Bible says all this stuff that Mary was told, that she did something unique. She simply pondered it, right? And it led me to ask this question. Why are we a culture that is so against pondering things, right? So rather than pondering, the probability of a total eclipse running through 2 cities that have the same name, Nineveh,
Right.
is pretty slim, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what I think about it, or it doesn't matter about anything actually, because God's going to do what God's going to do. But what's wrong sometimes with just listening to somebody and pondering, hey, could that have some meaning ever? Could that be a thing, right? Not. Yes, it is. So, thus saith the Lord, let's go react on it. But there's a lot of things that happen in our culture that we're unwilling to ponder because we've already made a determinate, right, decision on what we feel about it. You and I were talking about this in terms of theology, right? Man, we write our theology in not pen, but like chiseled out stone that cannot be erased or changed or thought through. Sometimes that's good. There's some theology that needs to happen with. But man, we're not willing to ponder what anybody else thinks or what anybody else says. So when we talk about this idea of counterculture, how do I become somebody who might be willing to just go, that makes me think, ponder about things?
Well, we're told to be teachable.
Ooh.
And I pondered this a little bit myself.
Ooh.
If our theology and our Christianity is not tested, it can become pretty stagnant and weak.
Yep.
Think of it as our theological muscle. One of the things we have to do, and this has happened to me through all my academic career. My beliefs have been challenged, and rightfully so. They need to be. I am a lifelong learner, as we all should be. I have seen stuff come across my YouTube. My wife, I've shared my wife and I don't have cable or dish. We watch YouTube, and I will have stuff come across, and sometimes I'm like, where'd that come from? That talks about, I was a former Calvinist, and so here's why I don't believe in Calvinism. And then another one may come up, well, I'm a former Arminian, and here's why I don't believe in Arminianism. And we have to, our theology has to be not so much question, but we need to say, why do I believe what I believe? Well, so years ago, I cassette tapes. Cassette tapes. I had some cassette tapes given to me to listen to. And the guy was talking about, he was down near, it was a person of my denomination, a Wesleyan, and so I'm Nazarene, but he was a Wesleyan, and so he was talking to this, he read this commentary or something. He was down in the Dallas area, so Dallas Theological Seminary is down there, okay?
Yeah.
So he called up this person who had written this commentary or whatever, if I remember the story correctly. It's been 30 years, so bear with me. And he asked the guy, he says, why do you believe this? He goes, because that's what I've been taught. Okay?
Yep.
So
That's what I've been told.
that's a good starting place. But then we got to say, wait a minute here. What is a contrasting view? I remember one of the books I had to read when I was in college was The 5 Views of Sanctification. Mm-hmm. The Arminian or Wesleyan view, the Calvinist view, and there's 3 other views. That, okay, so, and it challenged me to say, okay, I didn't think about it that way. That is what we do. One of the things that bugs me, it's one of my pet peeves is, there's right now the big thing is The Chosen. Some people, that's demonic. That's, okay, really? Have you seen it? What don't you like? Oh, I've never seen it. I've just heard.
I would never watch anything
I would
like that.
never watch anything like someone told me. Or the other one was several years ago, The Shack.
Yep.
About 15 years ago, The Shack. Well, The Shack's just bad. It's just someone told me that. Oh, and I've always asked, what didn't you like? But I didn't watch it. I didn't see the movie. I didn't read the book. I'm not going to read that. That's just wrong. How do you know? I had a professor in seminary number 1. His son reminded me of this. His dad would say, read a book twice.
Yep.
Once to agree with it and once to disagree with it. That's called education, not indoctrination. It's called education. So and part of it is, going back to your question, we're afraid to have questions because we don't want to be wrong.
Yes.
What if I'm wrong? Then I've lived a lie. No, you haven't lived a lie. You've been enlightened, and maybe you have learned something new. I hope that happens with counterculture. I hope it happens with Chasing the Wind.
Sure.
I hope it happens with Bob's stuff and Mel's stuff. I never thought about it that way.
Well, listen,
okay, I learned something.
I shared with you the other day that my entire view of the rapture has been challenged and changed because of conversations with you, not because you sat with a bat and beat me up or beat me
I
over the
thought
head.
about it a couple times,
but just being willing to entertain the thought, being willing to ponder and say, okay, what if this isn't the way that I think it is? What if it isn't the way? And it doesn't mean that the people who did it are terrible, awful people, right? They may they believe it for whatever the reasons they believe it, right? We are so afraid of being wrong, and because of the consequences of being wrong, we don't allow people.
R.C. Sproul was a rapture guy.
Yep.
Changed his mind because he was a theologian.
Yep.
Well-known theologian.
We quote him a lot.
Looked and said, you know what? I think I was wrong on this one. There's nothing wrong with that. To say, I've learned, I've changed my mind, it doesn't mean I was wishy-washy about something. It means I've allowed myself to grow. Now, here's the thing. In the essentials, we have to know. Now, I in one of my videos I just did this morning, I talked about the numerous views of the atonement, the substitutionary atonement, and then there's one starts on M. I can't think of it right now because I don't worry about it. I don't talk about these things all the time. But the Christus Victor. So those are, is there a little bit of truth to all of them? Sure it is. Sure is. There is wiggle room for things like for our eschatology. Because the problem is when our eschatology gets married to our soteriology, that is to say, our end times thinking gets married to our salvation theology. So, you're wrong, Andrew. You're not saved because you don't think right about the end times. They're associated, but they are not married. If you believe in post, trib, whatever, and I believe in pre, whatever, that has nothing to do with my salvation other than I need to be ready for whatever happens.
That's exactly right.
And so we need to have room for dialogue there because I may just learn something from you.
Well, I think that's the key to the Pharisees and the Sadducees were unwilling to ponder.
Yes.
They would not stop and say, could this be the Messiah?
Which is interesting because that is the Hebrew or the Jewish way of what would that be called? Dressing?
That is dressing.
Yeah. Hey, Andy, what about this? Well, Mark, that's interesting. But then what about this? Well, that's a good point. I didn't think about it that way. That's called dressing. That's how we grow to say, okay, maybe. And then when we can land on something and say, this, Jesus is the Son of God, that's a non-negotiable for me.
What isn't the whole idea about our lives as Christians to be grow in the grace and the knowledge of Jesus Christ, not be set in the grace and the knowledge of Jesus Christ, and don't move and don't. Again, I love the imagery that Jesus used of the reed, right? The reed blows, it moves, right? Yeah, it just doesn't break, right? And that's what you're trying.
Revelation knowledge that God, So what did Paul say in Philippians? He said a lot of things in Philippians, actually. But anyway, one of the things he talked about, and I love it because he's talking about, he says, in chapter 2, he says, I want to know Christ.
Yep.
And everything about him. Now that's a scary thing. I want to know Christ and the fullness of his salvation and his suffering, the fullness of his suffering. And so, you better be careful on that.
Better ponder that for a minute.
But then look what he says in verse 12 of chapter 3. I'm sorry. Not that I have already obtained all this or have already been made perfect.
Yep.
He's still got some growing to do, but he is perfect insofar as God has matured him, perfected him. God's doing the perfecting there. But I press on to take hold of that for which Christ Jesus took hold of me. Brothers, I do not consider myself to have yet taken hold of it, but one thing I do, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead, I press on toward the goal to win the prize for which Christ has called me heavenward. Now listen what he says. We all know that verse, and it's great. I have a little note in my Bible. Remember, Alexis had a slogan, the relentless pursuit of perfection.
Yep.
That is what we're talking about.
Relentless.
It's relentless. We keep moving on toward perfection. And what is perfection? Christ is perfection. We're to be Christ-like. But here's what he says in verse 15. All of us who are mature should take such a view of things. And if on some point you think differently, that too God will make clear to you.
Who makes it clear?
God will make clear to you.
So Mark doesn't beat me up over it.
Only let us live up to what we have already attained. So here's what I know. Okay. Well, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yep.
Let's talk about this. Is there anything that maybe another position would challenge that a little bit that you would think differently? He said, well, I don't know, but I'm open to hearing it. The theme song of many people, the theme hymn of many people in church, you know what it is? I shall not be moved. I shall not be moved. It's like their theme song. Well, no, because... And you can't have a discussion because many people can't handle drashing because we are so in our country politically. I'm right.
And we instantly shut down and we instantly get defensive and because we think that somebody challenging our theology is attacking us.
Exactly.
Right? It's the same thing though with our regular everyday life. I think if somebody walks up to me and says, Andy, are you sure that's the way you should fix your fence for your cows? I immediately take that as an attack.
Well, I know how to set up my fences.
I've been doing it for 30 years.
All my life, yeah.
Rather than saying, hey, wait, do you know a better way? Like, is there a different way? Why wouldn't I want a better way? That's the relentless pursuit of perfection.
Yes.
I'm not perfect.
I watch a guy on Instagram, and I think it's called the 40-year guy or something like that. He's from the South. He's funny. He goes, you mean to tell me I've been doing this for 40 years and I could have been doing this? Ain't no way, he says. And then he'll do something, and it'll be easier. And he'll go, ain't no way.
Yep. Ain't no way is a great chasing the wind.
It ain't no way is a great chasing the wind. And so, it is way. It is way.
When
And that's what Paul's talking about.
Yeah.
The relentless pursuit of perfection, the relentless pursuit of becoming Christ-like.
Christ,
and-
not Christ
Andy
becoming me
Wright
like.
like. Yeah, right. Or Andy like, Imitate me as I imitate Christ, Paul said. But to grow, and I remember talking to the guy who got me to Olivet, Tony Fightmaster, his name. Tony, if you're watching, hello. And I remember seeing Tony when I went when I was on sabbatical about 5 years ago, and I went back to Olivet Nazarene University, and Tony was available. We got together, coffee, and had a good time. And I said, Tony, how has your spirituality and your theology changed through the years? He goes, I've become less rigid.
Yep.
And I've heard one group say, well, all those Baptists, you just can't talk to them at all. They got it all figured out and they think they're right. And then you'll talk to our Baptist brothers and sisters, well, those Nazarenes or those Wesleyans or those Lakeview people, they just think they got it all figured out.
Yep.
Right? I've said it. How many times have I said it? You wind chasers who are now countercultureites. Ians, you counterculture Ians. Have I said, write your theology with a pencil, with a very big eraser.
Man, a big humongous eraser. Most of us are walking around with a big pencil with an eraser that's never been touched.
It's never been touched. But it looks so pretty.
There's
It looks so
another
pretty.
chasing the wind. I might have to take over your show. Hey,
You can join me for my
No, it's your show. I cannot add anything to what you're going to say.
gosh.
Hey, we're going to leave it right there. We'll see you next time right here at Counterculture.
Grace and peace.